So good day everyone. In this video we are going to be discussing formal logic, and the topic that we are going to be starting with is the logic of proposition. That is, in this topic we are going to be analyzing different kind of proposition, starting from simple proposition, compound proposition, complex proposition, and started from categorical proposition. But before we begin, we need to ask ourselves, what is proposition? A proposition can be said to be a declarative statement that is asserting a fact which can be true or false. That is a declarative statement that is asserting a fact which can be what? True or false. I will give you an example. For instance, if I say Tomisin is a boy, this is an example of a proposition because it is asserting a fact which can be what? True or false. It can be true that Tomisin is a boy, and it can also be false that Tomisin is a boy, but it does not reduce the fact that what? It is a proposition. Then another example of proposition that we can have is today is Monday and students are going to school. So this is also another example of a proposition because it is a declarative statement that is asserting a fact which can be true or what? False. So the first proposition that we are going to be talking about is called simple proposition. Simple proposition. So what is a simple proposition? A simple proposition is a proposition that does not contain another proposition as a component. Let me give you an example. If I say Olu is a good boy, this is an example of a simple proposition because it does not contain any other proposition as a component. It's just one statement, just one proposition, just one simple proposition. So this is an example of a simple proposition. So let's go to the next one, which is compound proposition. So what is a compound proposition? A compound proposition is a proposition that contains another proposition as a component. Let me give you an example. Olamide and Julia are good people. This is an example of a compound proposition because it contains another proposition as a component. If you look at this proposition very well now, it's telling us that Olamide is a good person and also Julia is a good person. So the two of them are coming together to form one proposition. That is why they call it a compound proposition. Let me give you another example. Today is Christmas, and if today is Christmas, then the Christians will go to church. As you can see, this is another example of a compound proposition because it contains another proposition as a component. If today is Christmas, then Christian will go to church. We have two different kind of proposition, simple proposition coming together to form one. That is why they call it compound proposition. See, today is Christmas, Christians will go to church. Today is Christmas is one proposition, and Christian will go to church is another proposition. So the two of them coming together to form one is what they call compound proposition. So that is why we said a compound proposition is a proposition that contains another proposition as a component. Now, for a proposition to stand as the component of another proposition, two conditions must be met. The number one condition is that proposition that is standing as the component, that is the second one, must be a proposition on its own. That is, it must be a proposition that can stand on its own. For instance, Christian will go to church. For it to successfully serve as the component of this first one, the proposition itself must be a proposition that can stand on its own. Christian will go to church, it can stand on its own. Then when you replace this particular proposition, the second condition is that when we replace the component with another proposition, the result will still be meaningful. That is, if we remove Christian will go to church and put another simple proposition there, the result is still going to be what? Meaningful. Those are the two conditions where we can have a proposition to serve as a component of another one. So let's try and replace Christian will go to church with another proposition. Let's say we want to replace it with people will be celebrating. People will be celebrating. So if today is Christmas, then people will be celebrating. As you can see, I've already replaced Christian will go to church with people will be celebrating, and the statement is still what? Is still meaningful. So we can say this is a standard compound proposition. If today is Christmas, then people will be celebrating, or if today is Christmas, then Christians will go to church. So the point I'm trying to make is that for a simple proposition, it is a proposition that does not contain another proposition as component. It is just one. Therefore, compound proposition is a proposition that contains another proposition as a component. It is more of like two in one. And for us to have a successful compound proposition, two conditions must be met. The component must be a proposition that can stand on its own. That it must be a simple proposition that can stand on its own. Then if we replace the component with another simple proposition, the result is still going to be meaningful. And that is what I did. I replaced Christian will go to church with people will be celebrating, and the results as a whole is still meaningful. That's why we have, if today is Christmas, then people will be celebrating. Then the third kind of proposition that we'll be analyzing before we go to standard form categorical proposition is complex proposition. So what is a complex proposition? A complex proposition is a proposition that contains a compound proposition as a component. Don't forget that the simple proposition is just like one, compound proposition is like two in one, then complex proposition is like more than two, let's say three in one. So for instance, if we have something like Nigeria will be destabilized if political leaders are corrupt and judges are not doing anything. This is an example of a what's it called? This is an example of a complex proposition, because we said a complex proposition is a proposition that contains a compound proposition as a component. So Nigeria will be destabilized. That is already the main proposition. Now the compound proposition, the component itself is now a compound proposition. Nigeria will be destabilized if political leaders are corrupt and judges are not doing anything. So we have three different propositions coming together to form one. In this particular complex proposition, we have Nigeria will be destabilized, we have political leaders are corrupt, and we have judges are not doing anything. So the three of them coming together is what we refer to as what? Complex proposition. So let me just recap everything I've said before we move down to standard form categorical proposition. We've talked about proposition. A proposition is just a declarative statement that is asserting a fact which can be true or false. Then we talk about a simple proposition. A simple proposition is a proposition that does not contain another proposition as a component. That is, it is just one. Then we talk about compound proposition. Compound proposition is a proposition that contains another proposition as a component. So let's say two in one. Then we talk about the complex proposition. Complex proposition is a proposition that contains a compound proposition as a component. So let's say three in one. So let's go to the next type of propositions that we'll be talking about. So we call them standard form categorical proposition. Standard form categorical proposition. So what is standard form categorical proposition? Standard form categorical proposition has been said to be asserting different kind of relationship between classes. That is, it is asserting a different kind of relationship between classes. Then when we say what is a class is just a group of things that have the same attributes or attributes. Let's say we can talk of the class of boys, we can talk of the class of human beings, we can talk of the class of lawyers, teachers, students. So a class is just a group of things that have the same attributes or attributes. So we can talk of the class of boys, lawyers, human beings, teachers, and students. So when we talk of standard form categorical proposition, standard form categorical proposition are just asserting different kind of relationship between different classes. Let's say we want to talk about the class of boys and lawyers now, and we want to use standard form categorical proposition. Don't forget that we are asserting different kind of relationship that can exist between boys and lawyers, the class of boys and also the class of what? Of lawyers. For instance, we can say all boys, that is all members of this class, are part of this class. So we can say all boys are lawyers. We can say no boys, that is this particular class, so the class of boys, none of them are part of the class of lawyers. So we can say no boys are lawyers. Then also we can also talk assert a kind of relationship that some boys are lawyers, that is some part of these people are part of these people. Then we can also talk about what's it called, another relationship that some boys are not lawyers, that is some part of this class are not part of this class. So the point I'm trying to make is that standard form categorical proposition asserts different kind of relationship between classes. Then we have 4 different types of standard form categorical proposition, because we can talk of the relationship in 4 different ways. So that's why we have 4 different kind of standard form categorical proposition. So let's talk about the class of boys and lawyers. So like I said, in standard form categorical proposition, we are talking about how this particular class is related to this particular class, and we have 4 different ways in which we can use in talking about them. So we can talk of them as all boys are lawyers. In other words, all boys are lawyers. We are trying to say that all these people, they are part of these people. Then another relationship that we can assert in between them is that no boys are lawyers. So in this particular statement, we are saying that check all the old boys, none of them are what? Lawyers. Then another relationship that we can assert between them is called some boys are lawyers. Then the last one is some boys are not lawyers. So if the particular proposition, if the particular proposition actually says that everything here is part of this one, that is all of these are part of the other class, then we say it is a proposition. Then if it says that no, if it denies a class inclusion, a full class inclusion from the subject term and predicate term, then we say a proposition. That is, it denies a class inclusion. Don't forget that standard form categorical proposition are asserting different kind of relationship between classes in terms of class inclusion. That is, this one says that all of this class are part of this class. This one says that none of this class are part of this class. So this one denies a class inclusion between this class and this class. Then some boys are lawyers. This one affirms a class inclusion, but partly. That is, it just affirms a partial class inclusion, that is some of this class are part of this class. So we say that is I proposition. Then the last one, some boys are not lawyers. It actually denies a class inclusion, but a partial class inclusion between the class of boys and also the class of lawyers, by saying that some boys are not lawyers. So we say that is what? O proposition. So the next thing that we're going to be talking about is the components. We can use this to analyze the component of standard form categorical proposition. That is, what are those things that comes together to make standard form categorical proposition? What are the components of standard form categorical proposition? So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is subject term. Okay, let me just say S, subject term. So for us to have a client from categorical proposition, we need a subject stem, we need predicate stem, we need copula and quantifier. So the subject stem, this is the subject stem, this is the predicate stem, this is the copula. The copula is what is joining the subject stem and the predicate stem together. Then this is the quantifier. Quantifier is just referring to the amount of quantity there. So for us to have any standard form categorical proposition, we must have a subject stem, we must have a predicate stem, we must have copula, which is joining the subject stem and the predicate stem together, and we must have a what? A quantifier, that is, which is making reference to the quantity that we are talking about in that particular proposition. So now let's now go to the analysis of the structure. Analysis of the structure of standard form categorical proposition. Analysis of the structure of standard form categorical proposition. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is quantity. The first thing that we're going to be talking about is quantity. Like I said, the quantity is majorly determined by the quantifier. That is, if that particular proposition make reference to all the whole members in the subject stem, then we say the quantity is what? Universal. Let's say a proposition states that what? All humans are mortals. So let me just say all H are M. And quantity states that what? If the proposition make reference to all the whole members in the subject stem, then the quantity is what? Universal. That is, a proposition is talking about all humans are mortal, so it make reference to all the whole members in the subject stem, then the quantity of this particular a proposition is what? Universal. Then let's talk about e proposition. No humans are mortals. So the quantity also states that, don't forget that it states that if the proposition make reference to all the whole members in the subject stem, or all the whole members of the class designated by the subject stem, then the quantity is what? Universal. So e proposition says that no humans are mortals. What this proposition is saying is that check all the whole humans, none of them are mortals, so the quantity is also what? Universal. Then I proposition, for the quantity states if it make reference to all the whole members in the class designated by the subject stem, then that particular quantity is what? Universal. But if it does not make reference to all the whole members, if it only make reference to some of the members designated by the subject stem, then the quantity is what? Particular. So I proposition says some humans are mortals. So this is some humans are mortals, which is I proposition. So all the particular proposition does not make reference to all the whole members in the class of the subject stem. It only make reference to some of them. So we say the quantity is what? Particular. So don't forget that quantity can either be universal or particular. If it make reference to all of them, it is universal. If it only make reference to some of them, then it is particular. So I proposition does not make reference to all of them, so definitely it is what? Particular. Then the O proposition, some humans are not mortals. So this is also what? Particular, because it does not make reference to all the whole members in the class designated by the what? By the subject stem. It's only talking about some of them. Some humans are mortal, so the quantity is what? Particular. So the next one that we're going to be talking about is quality. We've talked about the quantity, then the next thing we're talking about is quality. So quality can either be affirmative or negative. Quality can either be what? Affirmative or negative. So now the quality is a term that is used to refer to how, the feature of assertion in a particular proposition, that is what kind of assertion that the particular proposition actually made. Is it denying or affirming? Is it denying a class inclusion between two different classes, or it is affirming a class inclusion between two different classes? So that's what the quality indicates. And don't forget that I said quality can either be affirmative or negative. If it affirms a class inclusion. If it affirms a class inclusion between two different classes, then we say that what the quality is affirmative. But if it denies a class inclusion between two different classes, then we say the quality is what? Negative. So a proposition says all humans are mortals. So that means it actually affirms a class inclusion between the class of humans are what? Mortals. So a proposition is what? Affirmative. If proposition states that what? No humans are mortals, that is, it's saying that check all the humans, none of them are mortals. So the quality is actually what? Negative, because it is denying a class inclusion between the class of humans and also the class of what? Mortals. So the quality in this if proposition is what? Negative. The I proposition is saying that what? Some humans are mortals. It's actually telling us that check the class of human, some of them are what? Mortals. So it is affirming a class inclusion between two different classes. So the quality is what? Affirmative. O proposition says that what? Some humans are not mortals. It's actually telling us that check the class of humans, some of them are not what? Mortals. So the quality is actually negative because it's denying a class inclusion between two different what? Classes. So before we go to the last one, which is distribution, let me quickly use quality and quantity to show us how they name these A, E, I, O propositions. Having in mind our knowledge of quantity and quantity, then we see that the reason why they call A, E, I, O, they have their own different names. So quantity and quality. So in what's it called? A proposition, the quantity is what? Universal, because it says that all humans are mortals. So we will say the quantity is what? Universal. Then the quality is what? Affirmative, because it's affirming a class inclusion between two different classes, saying that all this one, they are part of this one. So we say universal, affirmative. And we just put proposition. So in other words, A proposition is universal, affirmative, proposition. Then E proposition is saying that what? No humans are mortals. So what is the quantity? Negative, because it's saying that what? Check the class of human, none of them are mortals. Sure you understand? So it's saying that check all the humans that we have at all, none of them are mortals. So it's making reference to universal. The quantity is universal because it's making reference to all the members of the class in the subject stem. Let's say for instance we have something like no men are women. What a particular proposition is telling us is that check all the men, none of them are women. So the quantity is universal. Then the quality, it is denying a class inclusion because it's saying that no men are women. That is, check all these people, none of them are these people. So the quality is what? Negative. And we just put proposition. So E proposition is called universal negative proposition. Then I proposition, the quantity is saying that some humans are mortals, or let's say some students are scholars. Some students are scholars. So the quantity is what? Particular, because it is not making reference to all the whole students. It's only talking about some of them. So the quantity is what? Particular. Then the quality is affirming a class inclusion because it's saying that some students are mortals. That is, some part of these people are part of these people. So it is what? Affirmative. Then we just put proposition. So I proposition is particular, affirmative, proposition. Then O proposition is what? Some girls are not lesbian. For instance, some girls are not lesbian. So some girls are not lesbian. The quantity, of course, is particular because it's making reference to some of them and not all of them. So particular. Then the quality, some girls are not lesbian, is denying a class inclusion. That is, some of these people class are not part of this class. So it is negative. And we just put proposition. So with our knowledge of quantity and quality, so A proposition is universal affirmative proposition. A proposition is universal negative proposition. I proposition is particular affirmative proposition, and O proposition is particular negative proposition. So now let's now go to the concept of distribution. So the concept of distribution. So distribution is just indicating how terms occurs in a particular proposition. That is how the terms occurs, how subject term and predicate term occurs in a particular proposition. So we say that the rule of distribution is that a term is distributed. A term is distributed if that particular proposition make reference to all the O members in the class designated by the term. That is, we have subject term and we have predicate term. So let's say in our subject term we have like teachers, all teachers for instance. So that particular term, subject term, which is teachers, is distributed if a particular proposition, whether A, E, I, O proposition, is making reference to all the O members in the class designated by the term. Sure, you understand? So if it's making reference to all of them, then that is when that class is what? Distributed. So when we give example now, the definition is going to be clear. So let's say we have a proposition, all students are good people. So we have our subject term and we have our what? Predicate term. So distribution is saying that a term is distributed if audio predicates, subject term and predicate term. So the distribution is telling us that a term is distributed if that particular proposition make reference to audio members designated by the term. So audio members of the class designated by the term. So a proposition says all students are good people. So now we are looking at the subject term and predicate term. Of course, it says all students. That means the subject term is what? Distributed. So the subject term is distributed because this particular A proposition is making reference to all the students. So the subject term in this A proposition is what? Distributed. Are good people. This particular proposition did not say anything about good people. So if all students are good people, does that mean all good people are students? Definitely no. So this particular A proposition does not say anything about the predicate term. It's only talking about the what? Subject term, and is referring to all the members in the what? In the subject term. So in A proposition, the subject term is distributed, but the predicate term is what? Undistributed. So A proposition, no students are good people. So this particular A proposition now, let's see whether the subject term and predicate term are distributed or it's just one of them. No students are good people. In E proposition, both the subject term and the predicate term are distributed because the proposition is telling us that check all the O students, none of them are good people, and also check all the O good people, none of them are students. Just for instance, if I tell you that no men are women, indirectly I'm saying that all the men, they are not women, and all the women, they are not men. So in E proposition, both the subject term and the predicate term are what? Distributed. Because it's talking about no students are good people. That is, none of these people here are this one, and also none of these people here are this one. So I proposition, some students are learners. Let me just put it that way. Some students are learners, or some students are good people. Good people. So now in I proposition, both the subject term and the predicate term are undistributed because distribution is only, a term is only distributed if it is making reference to all the members of the class in that particular term. So some students are good people. Undistributed. So undistributed. The predicate term is not making reference to all the students. It's only saying some of them are good people. then this one is also undistributed because it does not even say anything about good people. It only says that what some students are good people. That doesn't mean all good people are students, so it doesn't make sense. So in O proposition, some students are not good people. So in O proposition, the subject term is what undistributed because it makes reference to only some of them, but the predicate term is what distributed. The predicate term is distributed because the reason why is that if you check O proposition, is telling us that some students are not good people. It's indirectly it is telling us that check some of the students. Some of the students are not part of all the old good people. Some of the students are not part of what all the old good people. So like it's more like saying that bring all the old good people here, let them stay here. Some students are not part of them. So it's making reference to all the members in the class of good people. So in A proposition, the subject term is distributed, the predicate term is what undistributed. In E proposition, both subject term and predicate term are distributed. In I proposition, the subject term is undistributed and also the predicate term is what undistributed. But in O proposition, the subject term is undistributed while the predicate term is what distributed. So in our next video, we are going to be talking about immediate inference and different kind of relationship that exists between standard form categorical proposition of the same subject term and the same predicate term, but differs in either quality, quantity, or both of them together. Thank you.